I don't have any questions.
Now, me too, hocam.
Let's probably slides. Oh yeah. Last lecture we exercised the closed economy. Today we are going to the open economy. And in open economy, we are going to use the net export parameter, net export, which means the exportable goods in the country will be subtracted from the imported goods. And if it is positive, then this will then positively affect the output. And if it is negative, then negatively affecting the output. As I have mentioned to you, the output, the Y, so-called the GDP, real GDP, is the amount of the goods and services which is produced in a year. And this is the Keynesian expenditure output model, which is given to you here. The components of the GDP, so-called, is introduced to you. And we are having here the consumption, the rest of the other parameters, investment, and governmental expenditures. As you know, the consumption is the amount of the goods and services which is consumed regarding to the disposable income for the individuals and for the country as a whole or the nation's level activities. It is supposed to be the GDP, so-called the all individuals and the others consumption. And investment is supposed to be the amount of the saving which is realized in the country must equal to the investment. And from this point of view, it is also very important, which is contributing to the capital market in the financial system. And the governmental expenditures is also very important. The public debt and public surpluses is dependent to these parameter, the governmental spending, as much as our public services and let's say goods and services which is used in the public sector is concentrated here. And if it is increased, then we may have some problem with the debt. If there is some financial inabilities in the country, this is negatively affecting the output either. And the net export, I have already mentioned to you how it is going to be circulated in the system regarding to the open economy, the external relations, the trade relations, the balance of payments, is going to be in this parameter, and whether it is positive or negative is important because it is affecting and changing the output. And from this point of view, I have to inform you, it is also affecting the current account. If the current account is in negative, we suppose that the imported goods and services is negative, very high, very much more than the exportable goods and services. And if it is positive, which is usually negative, then it is supposed that exportable goods is higher than the imports. Of course, in this current account, we are including the transactions, monetary transactions, and some other activities regarding to these monetary activities. But here we are only considering and concentrating to the net export. The moral background is also important in this direction and in this from this point of view. The model is supposed to be an open, as I mentioned. It is because we are going to concentrate to the external relations with the other countries. And as you are understanding, the external relations also bringing the foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment, the trade relations, the political issues, the things which is very heavily affecting the whole economy in the market. This model, the exportable goods and the importable goods and services are now included in the system, in the model, and we have to note that the net export or NX is the equation, let's say left side is x minus m, And as I said to you, if it is X higher than the import or M, then this is good. And if it is M is higher than X, as you see, it is negatively affecting. The model still includes the government as defined, the tax, so-called the tariff, non-tariff measures, everything which is subjected to the trade relations. You know, in the trade relations, we have some sanctions, the tariff trade measures, so-called the custom tariff, and the non-tariff measures, so-called the sanitary, phytosanitary measures, export restraint, voluntary export rate restraint, export quotas, import quotas, and these things, direct payments, and some other, let's say, sanctions or measures which is applied for preventing and maintaining sustainable economy in the open economy. And the real exchange rate is also very important from this point of view, because as you are understanding, if your currency is depreciated or is continuously affected from the inflation, this is from one aspect, or it is usually assumed to be a good for the economy, because as I have in the former lecture briefly defined and explained you, the real exchange rate is the indication of the currency or the domestic currency, which is positively, sometimes negatively affecting and changing the trade relations and the trade capacity. And if we are looking to the inflation, and if there is an inflation in the short run, this is somehow positively affecting the trade capacity, because as much as your currency depreciates and reduce its value, this is somehow becomes cheaper for the foreigners, for the outsiders, for the external people in the country. We are in the outside of the other countries living. The consumers will enjoy to buy these products because their currency becomes more appreciated, and your products or goods and services become cheaper for them. And as a person, when you are going to Turkey, let's say you are the British or let's say American citizen, US citizen, and you want to travel to Turkey as a tourist, then you enjoy to shop and live and accommodate and have this vocational trip with a little bit cheaper cost, because or expenditures, because your currency, let's say dollar or UK pound, becomes more appreciated, and with this currency you are enjoying to live and consume, and you buy too much things with your currency, which is becoming a little bit appreciated in the domestic market. But on the other side, when you are thinking the economical aspect, because most of the politicians thinking this issue, as I have mentioned to you, and continuously using these inflationary policies or such devaluating the currency for enlarging and increasing the trade capacity, for reducing the importation of the goods and services towards the market. However, this kind of attitude is not such a simple and let's say basic knowledge. When you are go through to this issue, when you go to the production operation process, you are observing that there is some other parameters which is affecting and changing the market structure and the, of course, trade relations. If Turkish lira, for example, depreciated and becomes cheaper for the foreigners, and your products or produced goods and services become cheaper for the foreigners, it is somehow true good for your economy. But on the other side, in the short run, this is somehow may promote and accelerate a little bit the business or the market. But in the long run, when your currency depreciates and you are dependent to the energy, foreign energy, and you are dependent to the foreign input, and your economy exercise some negativities or require some let's say, foreign reserve for making these transactions, making these trade relations and trade towards to your country, let's say importing and exporting, you need to use some foreign reserves or foreign currencies. And all these things are required to increase and enlarge your foreign reserves. And as much as you are increasing your capacity towards to the foreign currencies, it is becoming more appreciated. And when it is becoming more appreciated in the long run, your currency continuously decreasing its value and becomes depreciated. And in the end of the day, you are the loser because you are continuously losing the value of your currency. You are continuously trying to survive and buying some currency for making some payments or making some transactions, monetary transactions to the other countries, because you are dependent to the other countries' energy, you are dependent to the other countries' inputs, and these are the negativities for your economy. And when you are doing these things, most of the countries, even if your currency is convertible in the foreign markets, is good for you, but if its value is not good and it is continuously depreciating from day to day, from hours to hours, as you are observing in our currency, in our markets, in our exchange stock market, sorry, in our exchange market, our currency continuously from hours to hours, from morning to midday, from midday to afternoon to night, it is devaluating, or it is depreciating its value. Its value is reduced, and you need to buy $1 with more Turkish lira, and this is somehow not good for you, because in everyday life you are exercising some, let's say, welfare decrease, and you are deep in the market because you are not able to maintain your, let's say, existence under these circumstances, because your currency continuously depreciated and becomes cheaper and lesser and lesser against foreign currencies. And as I said to you, if you are the producer, this is negatively affecting you because you have to pay too much dollar to buy this energy to being able to, or for being able to produce this for the next term products or goods and services. And at the end of the day, you are observing this is somehow in 2 years or in 3 years will cause you too much, because you are becoming poorer. Your currency become cheaper, and your currency and your economical strength and currency's value become weak. And this is also economically negative and not good for the whole system. And this is unfortunately a big issue. Most of the emerging economies exercising this issue and having this problem in their country, and they are not able to capable for changing this existing undesired situation, because they are not able to maintain strong currency. They are not having and holding this strong currency in their markets, because they are dependent to the foreign energy, foreign inputs. This has also meant that you continuously demanding foreign currency, but nobody demand Turkish lira, for example, for trade. Nobody demand Turkish lira for buying energy. But in Pakistan, in India, in China, in other emerging countries, Russia, and which is Russia holding the energy, they need some other currencies for maintaining their, let's say, economical activities. And this is the problem of the economies, because they are continuously requiring some foreign reserves, which dollar, euro, and some UK pound are convertible and very, very high demanded, and very high, let's say, parameter and also currency in the world market. And everybody in the foreign reserve system and market, they are preferring to hold these currencies because they are assumed to be a stable currency. They are preventing their value over the period of time. And instead of holding gold and some other precious materials, these currencies are also preferable because they are strong and good currency. And this is the negativities in the international trade, because when you are jumping up to the international relations and international trade, this is the big issue and big problem for you, because neither capital nor other parameters and problems can be solved under this bad economical structure. If the model is out of equilibrium, it is the changing real exchange rate that returns the model to the equilibrium phase. As I have mentioned to you continuously, this is a big issue. As you are observing here, if the exchange rate decreases, as you observe here, the output is supposed to be larger, and the consumption plus investment plus governmental expenditure plus net export is supposed to become lesser, and this is then the results of this exchange rate decrease. And from this existing condition, then net export is supposed to be increases until the output is becoming to the equilibrium position, where the output and the consumption, the components of the GDP, so-called the consumption, investment, governmental expenditures, and NX, is then equalized or become equal. In the other position, or in the other case, if the output is becoming lesser than the consumption, investment, governmental expenditures, and net export, then we suppose that the exchange rate increases, and at the end of the day, the net export decreases until, because you have to reduce it for maintaining the equity between output and the components of the GDP, again, the consumption, investment, governmental expenditures, and net export. Therefore, either or, in any cases, you have to reduce it or you have to increase it for maintaining this sustainable market structure, because we are wishing to become to the equilibrium, or at least we are wishing to approach to the equilibrium as much as possible. Our economic conditions and parameters helping us for maintaining this system. Of course, the supply and aggregate demand is also becoming very important from this point of view for approaching to the equilibrium. And if aggregate supply is more elastic than aggregate demand, then there is a problem. Or if aggregate demand is more elastic than, or which is more horizontal than more vertical, or more horizontal, it depends, horizontal or vertical, then this is also dependent to the elasticity of this market structure. Because if the aggregate demand is more elastic, which I have mentioned, I think, in the last lecture, it is becoming more flatter or more horizontal to the x-axis, then the aggregate demand curve is supposed to direct the market to the equilibrium if aggregate demand is more flatter, which means more elastic. But if aggregate supply is more elastic, then it is moving away from the equilibrium. Therefore, these components of the GDP is heavily affected from this elasticity issue that is affecting the aggregate demand and aggregate supply, and bringing the market to the or bringing the whole system to the equilibrium. As you are using, I think, Taptic use a little bit EU and some model applications, and this is the big issue and big problem for bringing the whole system, so-called the real GDP, to the system. We are preferring, of course, to approach to the equilibrium and having this sustainable economical model. And if this moving away from the equilibrium results of this aggregate supply position, which is more vertical and parallel to the y-axis, then this is then the problem. And of course, your model probably negatively affecting, will be negatively affected from the existing conditions because of this elasticity issue from the aggregate supply, because it is more rigid and more inelastic, it is more vertical. and this is then negatively affecting the whole system and is moving away from the system. Therefore, some governmental intervention is required to balance and correct the whole parameters for bringing the whole system to the equilibrium. This is how it is going to be used in the models. Therefore, this model that we are using or creating, you putting some parameters on the left side, and on the right side you put the GDP, for example, and you want to measure the impact of these parameters to the GDP. Then you have to consider also the elasticity, which is very heavily affecting and changing whether it is going to the equilibrium or moving away from the equilibrium. Then this issue all affecting each other, and of course is big issue. Okay, go to next slide. Building the goods market model. We move to the supply side now, as you are observing here. The supply side is also very important, because only the demand side is not considered. We have to look to the supply side, the so-called production function. As you see, we have the production function here. On the x-axis we have the labor, and on the y-axis we have the output. And as you see on the upper side of the graphic or the figure, we have the marginal productivity of labor, which is the delta Y over delta L, which is the productivity of the people or the employee in the system for bringing the market to the upper position, or bringing the market to the higher position, or to making more contributive structure and more contributive, let's say, production for the economy. And as we see, as much as it is increasing and enlarging, this productivity becomes smaller, because we don't have here the whole, let's say, indications. But as you see, if it is every 1,000 unit of labor considered here and here and here, you see, as much as you are enlarging this labor, its contribution to the output is becoming lesser, is becoming smaller. Therefore, contribution of the labor, or the marginal productivity of labor, is decreasing amount of increase because of the shape of this production function. And this causes some negativities to the economy, and you have to know where to stop to become more productive and become more competitive in the international market. In the lower part of this graphic also, similarly, you have the marginal productivity of capital, and again you have the capital, let's say the constant return of this capital. If you consider there is a constant amount of capital increases, let's say 1,000 unit every month or every year, the increase of this capital in the beginning phase of this output is more than the second, or then the third, then the fifth, or then the sixth, because it becomes smaller and smaller when you look to this shape of this curve, which is inverse U shape. If you go through, draw it to the to the x-axis, it goes to the optimal, and then it goes down. It goes like here. Therefore, this is then negatively affecting the economy, because after this optimal or maximum points, it is negatively affecting and changing the whole system. Therefore, you have to know what the best possible combination of this capital and labor for your marginal productivity of labor and marginal productivity of capital, to make the best possible combination to this production function. In the long run, the model, so output Y is determined by the factors as it is written here. The Y is equal to the function of the capital and labor, and there's also available technology for using and enlarging this production operation process. And we begin with this production function, as I mentioned to you, and for simplicity, we assume K is fixed and allow to change the labor in the upper part of this equation and this graphic. And as you see, as I have mentioned to you, as much as you are increasing and changing the output of the employee, or the capacity of the people who are going to become dependent in this system, this will then continuously decreasing and reducing its contribution to the output, and we get the functional form that is increasing at decreasing rate. This is consistent with the idea of diminishing marginal returns to labor, which is represented and indicated with the equation marginal productivity of labor, which is added to the 1 unit. As I mentioned to you, every unit increasing here and enlarging to the employee or the labor is decreasing amount of increase realized on the output, and this is then because it is the figure's shape and the position of the shape, it causes some decreasing amount of increase while the output while the employee or labor enlarge and increase, the contribution to the output is decreasing, and here it is indicated this as marginal productivity or labor is the function of the K and L, which is added labor plus one unit or additional 1 unit. Then it is subtracted from the, again, function of this, the former period of this capital and labor, which is the next period. Let's say if this is the capital and labor in the first period, and this is then the next period, which is added to the second phase or second period, then the second period will be subtracted from the first period for getting this marginal productivity of labor. This is then the slope of this function as it is mentioned and explained to you. This is the marginal product of labor. And it is also telling us that the change in output that results when increased labor by 1 unit, this will then cause also some increase on the output, but decreasing amount of increase is supposed to be realized. The similar approach which is indicated here can be employed and applied for the capital, and now the labor is supposed to be fixed, and this will then allow to change the capital. And now if this is the capital, then you may say K plus 1 comma L will be subtracted from F in function capital and labor, which means you're gonna change now the capital a little bit, 1 unit. Then these differences will then give you the marginal productivity of capital as it is indicated in the lower part of this figure. Okay. And building the goods markets model, as it is indicated in the two-dimensional graph, you see there is the labor and capital now together indicated, and output is on the vertical axis. And as you see, again, if we choose to combine these images, we will get a surface with output on the vertical axis and capital and labor on the X and the other axes, let's say. And in the case, a cross section of the surface will provide us with the two-dimensional production function, as I mentioned to you. The vertical axis is again the output, and the others are the labor and capital in three-dimensional graph, as it is indicated. Then this shows you in the red where the additional increase on the capital or labor is realized. As I have mentioned on the graph here, the labor is changed. And now we are using, of course, the real wages, which is wages divided to the price of the market product. And as you see, if it is not divided to the price, then this will be the nominal wages. But here we are using real wages because it is helping him to understand how it is really affecting and changing the welfare of the employee. Therefore, factors demand is the marginal product of the factor. The factor labor demand, for example, is defined as the marginal productivity of labor as it is represented on the decreasing and inversely related between the labor and real wages is supposed to be as much as the labor is enlarged, the real wages is supposed to be decreasing. And when you are looking to the other part of the capital, where the rental cost, which is the interest rate, is supposed to be the real wages, as you see, exactly the same for the capital. Marginal productivity of capital is the real interest rate divided to the price. Then the rental rate of the capital, which is the interest rate, will be then given and will be obtained as the real rental rate, which is the real interest rate of this capital that or loanable fund that you are going to use in the production operation process. Then the marginal productivity of capital is becoming again negatively related with this interest. As much as you are increasing, it is decreasing the capital, because if the rental cost of this capital is higher, then you are getting, of course, lesser. You don't want to rent, or you don't want to buy more, or you don't want to loan any more capital for your businesses. But if it is cheaper, which means the interest rate is lower, then everybody enjoy to borrow some capital for making some businesses, isn't it? Similarly, in the real wages, if the real wages is higher, which means the if we are excluding the nominal in the market, then putting the purchasing power parity here, then this will then cause, of course, the labor demand. Then marginal productivity of labor is becoming lesser as much as the real wages becoming higher. Or if it is going down, then it is supposed to be the labor demand is enlarged, which is normally, as you know, in the minimum wage law, is suggested that if you are holding the minimum wage higher, the employer prefer less people to employ, and people becomes unemployed. Therefore, the reason for holding the minimum wage lower, it is always a discussion topic, letting the old people to employ and let them to survive, let them to maintain their standards, at least not hungering, let's say, letting them outside of the economy. Then in the China, for example, where there are billion of people is working, they are paying lesser wages, lesser let's say minimum wage, and this will then cause to the people's welfare, but it is at least letting people to survive. They are getting some $50, $100, but many people will be employed, but the contribution, the productivity of these people are becoming lesser compared to the Germany, compared to the UK or some other US employee, where they are holding more capital, because in these countries they are getting in an hour, let's say $15 or $20 or $30. But in our countries, they are getting $2, $1 in China, in Russian countries, in Ukraine, and in other let's say emerging economies. They are always getting maximum 300, 400, or 200 dollar per month. When you are going to divide it, and then it will become very small amount per hour. And this is then the problem of the world market, because they are contributing to the production operation process, but very minimal, very small amount of contribution is supposed to be realized, because they are not very qualified. The know-how and the innovative power is not very well, and this is the problem of the all markets. And currently, as I mentioned to you in the last lecture also, this is spread to the this is enlarged to the whole world. And in the recessionary period, most of the developed nations also reduce the wages, as mentioned last lecture, and people becoming employed with smaller wages. Of course, comparing to the emerging economies, it is still very high, but comparing to the a decade years ago, then the wages become smaller. Therefore, if you go to the OECD database or the World Bank database, you are observing this problem is enlarged, and the amount of the rich people becoming smaller, or becoming lesser and lesser, and the people who are holding the whole capital in their hands are now not that much enlarged, comparing to the former 2 decades. People are very distributed the capital, and they are holding too much capital in their hands, but now some larger firms such as Rothschilds, Rockefeller, and some others are holding the whole capital in their hands and managing the whole financial system and the whole economical, let's say, structure easily. When we go to the demand side, we begin with the consumption, investment, government expenditure, and the net export. This gives us the following national income accounting identity. So now we are going to the demand side because we talk too much to the supply side. And in the demand side, as I mentioned to you, as I mentioned in the supply side, we have the function, production function, as it is given there, y is equal to A multiplied with F is the KL, which means the available technology is the function of the capital and labor. And for the demand side, we have the components, which is given here. Now the consumption function is going to be subjected here. And as you see, the consumption function is the representation of the disposable income, which is subjected to the taxes. Without taxes, then you are having disposable income. Then the production function will become a little bit different, and the amount of the expenditure output model, we have now the consumption, which is going to be considered with the investment and governmental expenditures and net export, because they are going to consume now. They are going to buy these things, or they are going to spread these things to the market and enjoy to shop and, or let's say, buy and sell these things as a sellers and as a buyers. And on the equation, the saving rate, which is the S is not represented here, but S is also I, which means saving is equal to investment. And if we say the marginal productivity of saving plus marginal productivity of consumption must equal to 1, then the consumption as a let's say coefficient is supposed to be, will become 1 minus S, which means consumption plus saving coefficients, when you're going to add, is becoming equal to 1. That means the amount of the let's say coefficient or the slope of this product consumption function is supposed to be a number, let's say between 1 and 0. And if it is 80%, let's say 0.80, then we may say 0.20 is the saving rate, which means the consumption function has also determined the saving function. Therefore, the marginal propensity to save is delta Y over delta C, or vice versa, delta S over delta C. Then will give you these estimations or the average estimations. And here the consumption function without the autonomous consumption is given here. C is equal to, C is the coefficient or slope, where I said the marginal propensity to consume is multiplied with the disposable income, which means Y minus T. Therefore, this equation says or gives us how much the people consume in the market. We are talking about the aggregate market structure, and this is then the given consumption function, which we are talking about the whole consumers, not the individual. And when go to the investment, R is the real interest rate, and investment, and the, are you able to follow me? Because I am talking blah, 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 blah. I don't know if you are understanding or not. I don't know. I hope you are understanding me. Is that okay that we are going? You satisfied? You are understanding? You are following? Okay, then.
I am following.
Trying. Yes, yes.
Okay. Because I will also apply these on the numerical models, but first we have to understand the structure, isn't it? We have to understand the models. Anyway, as I said to the R is the interest rate, which is the, let's say, important factor affecting and changing the investment, so-called the saving. The investment is supposed to be part of uh, the part of the not consumed money or not consumed disposable income. Therefore, saving is amount of the money which is not distributed to the consumption. And if the saving rate is 20%, we suppose the investment is also 20%. But this is mostly affected from the interest rate or nominal interest rate, or you may say real interest rate if it is divided to the price. Therefore, as you see here, because we already it becomes larger. I think it's okay. Okay. It starts again from the beginning. I have to let me go to my slides, please. Or I can. Is it better like this, or shall I have to transfer to the small one?
No, it's better. It's normal.
Okay. Okay. Because
It's
we
okay
have
for
to go.
Raja.
Okay. Because we have to go to our slide again because I pressed wrong button. But if you want, I can change it. Okay. Demand function. Okay, we are here. I was trying to show you, as you see, the real interest rate and wages also divided to the price. And as it is indicated here, you see the real interest rate has also meant that when you're going to divide it to the price, then you get the real interest rate. But we are talking about the nominal interest rate, which is affecting the saving rate. And as much as the saving rate is higher, this is also affected from the interest rate, so-called the nominal interest rate. And the nominal interest rate is supposed to be is equal to the inflation. I don't know if you know the Fisher equation. The Fisher equation says nominal interest rate minus inflation should be equal to zero, at least zero, for not losing the value of the money. And from this point of view, if this applied to our economy, to our Turkish economy, this is not possible because our inflation is around 80%, isn't it? Or 70%. And if it is 70% nominal interest rate is given to you, this will then catastrophe. This will then very big issue for the investment, because if the nominal interest rate for the savers is 70, then it is expected that the interest rate for the, let's say, borrowers or for the investors is 76 or 80 somehow, because it should be higher than the savers account interest rate. And from this point of view, if the borrowing interest rate such high, then nobody will borrow to invest, and it is not possible to enlarge the economical activities. But on the other side, if we don't do this, our currency is depreciated. Our currency's value will become lesser and lesser, and this is unfortunately not good for our economies. And this should be corrected either by using the paper market, so-called the open market operations, the expansionary money policy, contractionary money policy. You know, the bond, stock market papers must be used for controlling the amount of the money supply in the system, for not letting this money supply enlarge and increase in the system, or reducing the system for becoming more appreciated. Therefore, these things are becoming very important for the banking sector, for becoming autonomous and becoming an independent organ from the government, for being able to control the money and control these all parameters for creating more sustainable economical structure in the market. And as I said to you, if the real interest rate is increased, which means you are increasing the amount of the interest rate for letting people borrowing some capital or investing, this will then cause some decrease on the investment. And in this case, however, it is the world interest rate, which is indicated with R star, that dominates the small open economy. much like a perfect competitor is a price taker, the small open economy is an interest rate taker. Okay. Domestic, is that okay? Because I'm hearing some voices. Domestic investors always have access to the world interest rate because they are in this market and their economy is so small it cannot affect the world interest rate because the capital amount which is used in the larger markets is unfortunately is much bigger than the considered small country modern. And as I said to you, this is then also heavily affected from the government policy, the tax policy. If the tax rate is high, this is also heavily affecting and changing the amount of the money which is going to be used in the system. For example, if you subject to the disposable income more heavily tax, let's say 20%, this is then negatively affecting the consumption and also the investment or the so-called the saving rate. And in our last lecture, I also mentioned the tax amount or the tariff amount should not be very high, because if it is very high, this will go to the dead weight, which means neither government nor the producers nor the consumers profiting from this kind of higher taxes. It is only causing some chaotic platform and market structure to the economy. And as much as you are increasing the tax rate, which I may introduce you in the following chapters, maybe I can employ some graphical, let's say, presentations to show you how the tax enlargement affects and reduce the welfare. Therefore, tax rate must be reasonable, acceptable level for creating sustainable economical structure for the both parties, for the consumers, for the producers, and for the government. Because if the government think I will put more tax and get more money to perform my business, this is not good business. This is not good economy policy, because this is only dead weight lose for the both parties. And the NX, as I mentioned to you, is the trade balance is given as the balance of payments, and the current account deficit or surplus is estimated if we are excluding the monetary transactions, is dependent on the real exchange rate also. And from this point of view, when we rearrange the equation, then we have y is equal to the so-called the marginal propensity of consumption, so-called the C, is the consumption equation, y minus t is the disposable income, plus I in bracket is the real interest rate for the world, plus the government expenditures, plus the NX, which is the amount of the net export that realized in the market. And when we add this y to the other side, to the left side of the equation, and the G, then you are having, of course, rearranging this equation. And then now we have this, as you see, output, the GDP will be subtracted from the consumption and subtracted from the governmental expenditures, which is showing us only the investment. We are having then only investment. If we are subtracting all these things from the output, from the GDP, then this will then gives you the investment, because we have only investment plus a net export. And if you add the if you know this investment is equal to saving amount, the national saving. So of course we are talking about SN is the national. Then national saving is going to be equal then investment amount, which is the dependent to the real interest rate plus the NX. And if we add this to the other side of the equation, so-called the saving and investment is going to be subtracted, which is then the net capital outflow, because when saving is positive, it is lent abroad supposed to be, which is really realized, and this will then gives you the net export. Okay. Good market equilibrium is shown here, the loanable fund markets. As you see, this is then the saving investment net X, NX, and saving investment is supposed to be not affected from these changes. And we say the small open economy model, long run equilibrium occurs at the point where there is the intersection between these saving minus investment, which is the function of the real interest rate, and then the output will then becomes again C multiplied with the disposable income plus the investment multiplied with the real interest rate plus G plus NX. And then if the system is out of equilibrium, then the E, so-called the epsilon, must change to the equilibrium to the system as much as possible. We are rearranging it. And when we recall this, then the saving minus investment, which is the function of the real interest rate, then will becomes to NX. And as it is mentioned in the capital flow in the former slides, then it's just a rearrangement of the goods and services in the market into the net capital flow. Inflow, outflow will then gives you this. Then the trade balance will be then realized. And this is rearrangement, so-called the loanable fund markets, which is represented on this graph. And if the loanable fund market is out of equilibrium, then the exchange rate adjusts to equilibrate it, which in turn ensures that the good market is in equilibrium, as it is shown here. It is becoming reduced and reaching to the equilibrium position where the saving and investment and NX become intersect each other. Okay, now the transition, the market in transition we are showing here. There are various effects which can enter the model and change either this saving and investment or NX, leading to change in the real exchange rate, as it is indicated here. The exchange rate is in the equilibrium shown. Things that might shift saving investment include changes in the output, tax and government, and the marginal propensity to consumption, as it is given here. As you see, then it is shifted to the world equilibrium. And the things that might shift the net export include change in domestic and foreign trade policy, which is mentioned in the former slides. This policy will then affect results of these tariffs or some other non-tariff measures such as quotas, and this will then shift to the larger NX and enlarge it to the E star, so-called the exchange rate star. And after this, then shift is as much as to the higher where the expected results happen, because as I mentioned to you, results of this appreciation, all this negatively or positively affecting parameters and real exchange rate shifts the equilibrium to the higher level and reduce it to the again expected level where it is realized in the upper position. As a conclusion, the small open economy model is a simple static model that allows us to see how the real exchange rate adjusts to keep equilibrium in the loanable fund markets, which implies equilibrium in the good markets. We also see how various exogenous stock shocks can affect either saving and investment or net export, and therefore lead to a different real exchange rate that equilibrates the good market, as it is indicated here. Okay, this was the presentation for today. Since you are again what is the time? It's 19:08. Is around 7:10, because 9:30 I have the other class. I stop here because I was planning to present you one more slide, one more PowerPoint, but I will stop here. And I will upload this closed and open economy to you for your studies. And you can also watch these videos in the YouTube, Ergin Akalpler. If you have any question, then you can contact me. I think this semester we are all together. You too. The rest, I don't know if they are not, because they are registered but not coming to the class regularly. they are always complaining they are not able to attend to the class, or they are not able to join the class. I don't know what's the problem, but we already add them to the members. And if they are not able to attend in 2 weeks' time, then they will be excluded from this course. And we will go together with you, Taptik and Fevzi, to finish this semester together. And I will give you one assignment again regarding to the Keynesian expenditure model, but let me produce some numerical examples for you. And then I will give you the model to do the necessary application with tax impact and all other things together. And after finishing Keynesian, because sometimes I prefer to start with solo growth model, but I usually prefer to start with Keynesian model because it is starting this output expenditure model, the components of the GDP. And it is better to give you first the Keynesian model, Keynesian expenditure model, and then I will give you the solo also. Do you have any question, please?
Hocam, everything is fine so far, but previous lecture was not downloaded in our file here.
You mean what is down? You mean while we are teaching, or
This,
to the system, to the queues, or to the
yeah.
YouTube? Where?
No, it's
Where?
queues, not queue or Teams.
Teams.
If
It is
there
not.
is in your channel, we can do it from there.
I think it is there. I don't know why you not see, because it is automatically in the system, in the Teams. But if you don't see, you can see in YouTube. You know how it is, where it is. Then you can watch there also. But I will upload these PowerPoints to the queues also. So there will be no problem for you, I think.
Okay.
Because I cannot intervene to the Teams. Teams is automatically uploading the videos, and if you don't see, I don't know what's the problem. This is not my issue. This
No,
is
video
probably
is
a
okay.
technical issue.
Video is okay.
Yeah. What?
Hocam, video is okay, but for individual
PowerPoint.
working, some
PowerPoint.
yes, I usually downloading the PowerPoint. I'm working on PowerPoint. If
But
necessary, I'm
PowerPoint,
coming back to your voice recorder and get information from there.
Yeah, PowerPoints I will upload. I wait to finish, close and open together, and I will upload together. Don't worry, I will upload next week both
Okay,
together.
hocam.
And then next week, then we will have some more comprehensive regarding to this issue. Okay, then thank you very much for you joining, and see you next week.